Why do some people believe that the only solution to environmental catastrophe is government-imposed degrowth? And how does a railroad completely debunk their entire ideology? Now, you've probably heard this argument before. Our current path of endless economic growth is unsustainable. The quest for limitless growth with finite resources will only lead to growing inequality, a climate catastrophe, and possibly even the extinction of humanity itself. These fears have led to a new movement of environmental activists who are calling for sweeping social, economic, and political changes to combat what they claim is a looming climate change catastrophe. And one of their key demands is an end to economic growth. Advocates of degrowth have alleged that governments intentionally shrinking the economy and restricting the amount of resources being consumed is the only way to protect the environment and reduce inequality. But there's one massive problem with their outlook on the world, and here's where railroads come into play. Consider this fact. 100 years ago, virtually all trains around the world were powered by one source: coal. This coal was used to fuel fires for the train's water boilers, and the resulting steam power is what propelled the locomotive. The problem was that the steam engines were notoriously unreliable and inefficient. They required vast amounts of coal, emitted huge amounts of pollution, and were labor-intensive and even dangerous to maintain. But here's the thing. As the economy exploded during the 20th century, it wasn't as if railroads simply consumed more and more coal forever. They embraced innovation to fuel more economic growth. Diesel and electric locomotives replaced steam engines, which eventually replaced coal power altogether. And it wasn't like these new trains consumed more resources. In fact, modern locomotives are more fuel efficient, emit less pollution, and require far less maintenance. This transition made railroads more efficient than ever before. And this increased efficiency now shows up in the marketplace in the form of greater economic growth. The modern railways that crisscross Canada and the US today are worth far more than their predecessors from 100 years ago. But this increased value is precisely what degrowth advocates rail against. And here's where the fundamental flaw of the degrowth movement reveals itself. This movement ultimately offers people abject poverty and even authoritarianism, all while masking it as an altruistic movement intended to save the planet or even civilization itself. But economic growth isn't about simply consuming more. It's about coming up with more efficient ways to use the resources we have at hand. We've seen this all throughout history with the invention of countless things: the combine harvester, the car, the plane, the steam-powered ship, the computer, the internet, smartphones, you name it. Virtually every single invention that has driven economic growth has delivered us a breakthrough via enabling us to achieve something more efficiently than we were able to before. And here's the best part. It won't be government agencies imposing poverty that will produce greater environmental outcomes. It will be free people creating greater efficiencies that are good for consumers and the environment.